2003. Oh, my apologies. I didn't know you were stopping by. It's Wednesday. It's brain and bicep day. But I'll take some time out of my rigorous workout so I can call a couple of my top-ranking friends and explain to you people what injection rate looks like. Okay, let's go. Oh, my God, the burn is so deep. Oh. Well, I'll take these off because they make me look way too smart and get to making some phone calls here. So, first, who should we call? Let's call Chase, because Chase was just on the Dino, making some Dino hits, and I know he's awake. So, let's see if I can get him to video call.
What's going on?
What are you doing?
Oh, not much.
Well,
ready to run an engine?
Is it Kenny's?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're building a UCC motor for Kenny Burner?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He basically had purchased some of what was left over from Turbo Tom's engine, and he's going to let that legacy live on. So
Right on.
made a few runs on the dyno with it, got it broke in this morning, so he's actually going to be wanting some updated video here soon.
Perfect. So basically, Chase, you're pretty much like what I'd call a fifth degree black belt in the diesel industry, wouldn't you say?
I don't know about that. I try.
We all do. All right. So how many dyno hits a week do you think you do?
A week's hard telling because it kind of goes in spurts.
For sure.
I'll say I'd probably put 200-300 on this year, and that's probably pretty standard. So this spring, from January to now, it's probably about 150. I'm a little ahead of myself. But by the time June rolls around, we'll probably have close to 300 grips on that thing. It's nothing to burn 100 gallon of diesel fuel in the spring.
Yeah. And these dyno hits you're doing for, like, Kenny's a UCC/drag race guy, right?
Yeah, so we'll get those things broke in on the dyno and kind of give them a clean bill of health before we ship them, make sure there's no oil leaks, make sure the rings are, seated in and everybody's, happy, and get the head retorqued, lash the valves and get it ready for them. And then, when they get it, they can start beating on it. And, I've got some confidence in it. They got some confidence in it. And if anything's an issue, we can, go from there.
And you still, like when you dyno it, like you already mentioned that you're seating the rings. And for the guys that don't understand what that really means, like you put together a fresh motor, the piston rings haven't really taken a seal to the cylinder walls yet. So if you go and pour the boots right to it right out of the gate, like what happens?
Well, honestly, they need load. Like they can't, idle time's the worst thing for them. So like an engine like this, if I send it to Kenny and let's say he's got, a bunch of work to do with his tuner and they need to work on idle time and stuff like that and get the thing to spool, and I want to get all that out of the way in my test cell, control the
amount of
the whole shooting match, which we break them all in around a 1500 horse window, so it's obviously they're getting a little power put to them. We typically break them in what I call 3-inch trim, which is a Hards 3-inch turbo. That's obviously what I've got the most experience in, so we break everything in there. Very similar fuel quantity we would run in that application, so that also gives me an idea of the efficiency of the engine, depending on how what kind of cylinder or what kind of bowl combo is in the engine, whether it's narrow bowl, wide bowl. If your injectors are doing what they're supposed to. I have a lot of data on that, so I try to stay in that region when I'm breaking everything in.
Yep. So staying in your lane, knowing what you've got for results in the past, and then expecting that to perform that way. And then once the piston's seated, the rings are seated, you can pour the coal to it and then start like UCC guys or excess of 2,000 horsepower, right?
Yeah, so I feel like there's a couple different levels to the break-in. So Derek Rose is a prime example. We can break his in at 1,500 horse, and I'm going to reference baseball. We get to first base.
Yeah.
Get that 1,500 horse. It usually takes, even at 1,500, I would need to put probably 10 to 12 dyno passes on it.
Yep.
To get to second base. by the time we get to second base, I'm not even worried about it after the first 5 or 6. I'm ready to get it in the truck. Let those guys put the big charger on it, and they'll basically see their block pressure go up to a specific number. Let's say 3 pounds.
Yep.
And obviously the block ventilation depends on what the block pressure is going to be, but that's another topic. Get it up, and it'll stabilize, and then once the rings are fully seated, that block pressure will start dropping back down.
Yep.
1 to 2 pounds is pretty normal on something that's making, like Derek's, at honestly between 25 to 3,200 horse, depending on what he's trying to do. I think the thing runs like 470s at 2,600 horse pretty consistently. But yeah, get them broke in, get the rings seated. That's a vital part to that. And the oil is another thing. We do run a break-in oil, run a 30-weight AMS oil to break them in. I'm not a stickler on what you run, as long as it's quality oil, whether it's AMS oil, Hot Shots, Schaefer's. Like, everybody's got their own flavor. But I want to get them broke in on a standard, like 30-weight oil, and that's kind of how we do things around here. But the big engines, that's another topic. Like, the guys that are going straight to the drag strip, let go of the button. I mean, they got to have protection on the bearings, so they typically throw a 2050 in it, and it is what it is.
Yeah, there we go. My phone just freaked out. All right, well, back to topic.
I had a phone call.
Oh, okay.
Cody from UCC bugging me.
Oh, right on. Dino Cody.
Yep.
All right, so back to topic. Injection, and this kind of goes, like, this isn't just a common rail question, but more of a mechanical and common rail. Injection rate. Like, how important is injection rate? And really, like, what is injection rate? Because a lot of guys that I'm trying to show this video to, they're doing things where they're 12 valve guys, they've been pulling their fuel plates out, and in common rail ran, that's like 4,000 microseconds with no injection rate, and they don't really understand because they see a bunch of smoke, see a bunch of EGT, and they think they're making like peak power, but most of them aren't even dynoing it. They're just doing it because they're copying some guy on the web that read it, and then he tried it and it smoked and it run better than it did stock, so he thinks it's like optimized. And I've never found that to be true, so I just wanted to get opinions of other expert guys that I would say are like 5th degree black belts. So, yeah.
So, and at the end of the day, there's a window of opportunity in any compression ignition engine to, create combustion, whether it's gas or diesel. With diesel, we think about like an 849, equipped truck. That thing supposedly makes, 320 horse factory, and we're asking these things to make, in, like the pulling world, upwards of 1,500 horsepower. Well, to do that, you have to get the fuel at the right time, especially if we're trying to make these engines run at a higher RPM. If we're trying, let's say we're using ISX Cummins, for example, 3,000 microseconds at 1,200 RPM, like, that's acceptable because of the engine speed.
Piston speed is super slow. We've got lots of time.
Yeah. Now, when you're, like Derek, let's say we're trying to run 6,000, 6,500, which is not out of the realm of possibility or norm for what we do. You can't do that. Like, we want to be, 800 to 1,000 US on a truck like that. I mean, how many phone calls have I told you, like, hey, bro, we need a bigger set? Like, that happens quite a bit. And, we're getting to the point now where we have injection rate, we have the quantity we're looking for. And what that does, it allows us to not have to run as much advance to get the fuel in the cylinder. We're still getting what we want in the cylinder, but we're getting it at the right time. It's all about opportunity. And you can see it because if you run, let's say you run an injector that's too small and you got to run, let's say 2,000 microseconds.
Yep.
You'll see that event's really long. The engine doesn't want to rev. Exhaust back pressure is really high because the event's continuing on to burn in the pipe instead of in the cylinder.
Right.
And so back pressure's higher. All these things, they're all correlated. So as you put a bigger injector in it, get the event shorter, what I call crispy, get the motor to do what it wants to do. Then you can focus on other areas of the engine, like, okay, now that I've got a fast injector in this thing, now I can revisit cam timing, and see if I've left something on the table with the camshaft to take advantage of, time in the combustion cycle.
Sure.
And we've done that.
So beginning of injection and end of injection, BOI, EOI, depending on really engine RPM, that needs to be shorter, tighter, and more crispy as we increase piston speed or RPM, right?
Absolutely, especially if you want to run RPM. If you want to stay down the 3,500 to 5,000 range, you can get away with running some more duration. But if you want to run from 5 to 7,000, like we're pushing the boundaries with some of these other engines,
yep.
You got to be short and sweet. High pressure. We love 240 MPa, anywhere in that range, and that 800 to 1,000 US is where I love to be.
So common rail guys get the advantage of picking their pressure. Mechanical guys don't, and mechanical guys don't understand that if we put a really crisp, violent delivery valve, a camshaft with good injection rate, and the proper size injector, meaning not too big but not too small, those three things basically have to work together in a mechanical pump in order to get good injection rate. Because like the stuff that we built for Kenny, he's going to be like UCC, and you're not going to put that same injector in a street driven truck. And no matter what your tuner says, no matter what the mechanical injection forum says, a set of 5x18s or an injector that's capable of 3,000 horsepower, you can't really turn it down because the hole size is just too bloody big. And without having proper pressure in the line feeding the injector, that injector is never going to act the way it's supposed to act. So some of the mechanical guys, they're trying to run like really poor camshafts in the pumps. And they're trying to get away with like either a stock delivery valve that won't really punch the line very hard, or they put like full cuts in it, and they think that's great because the full cut, like once it goes to open, it really doesn't ever close, so the end of injection is garbage, and they see a bunch of smoke and they think there's more potential for power, but they're not understanding that as the piston goes up, you want to start injecting a little bit, and you want it to be all in basically at TDC, and you can chase it down just a smidgen, but if you chase it down too far, black smoke.
Diminishing return, you miss the boat.
Yeah.
If it's not in,
on time,
fast, like we're talking about, right up there at TDC, let's say, for example, like the drag race engine, we want to be, let's just, for example, 1,000 US. Derricks, for example, let's say we're 28 degrees at 6,000.
Right.
We want, at least 80% of that fuel to pop off, before TDC, and the last 20 is on the other side.
Yeah.
And when you start chasing it down the cylinder, you're just making heat. It's not acting on the piston like if it was a nitro motor or something that its rate of expansion was significantly higher, you can get away with stuff like that. But that's not the fuel we're running.
No, we're slow burning oil.
I mean, it makes cylinder pressure and it does what it does, but there's a window of opportunity, and I beat that drum pretty hard. And I'm not the most technical when it comes to that, but I have the experience from the dyno, and the crankshaft doesn't lie. It tells you what it wants. So as long as you pay attention to that, I am going to start playing with some cylinder pressure, stuff like that, and see what we're actually seeing. But yeah, you got to get in the fuel, or get fuel in the cylinder at the right time. And low pressure, you're not atomizing the fuel. It doesn't want to burn. It just make smoke. You're
right.
Wasting fuel.
Right. Another thing, like I try and preach to people like hole quality, meaning like spray orifice quality. And especially in the mechanical world, these guys are used to really poorly made holes that were made by EDMs that weren't even like a nozzle quality EDM. And from our stuff, just pictures and the way we treat things, like during the whole process and after we make the hole, like with AFM or extrude hone, we're really trying to make a super efficient gun barrel. If you picture each one of those little spray orifices being a gun barrel, I'm trying to build up pressure in that gun barrel until it finally breaks the face. that way the atomization is the absolute best. So if we took, like if I gave you a set of 5x18s in common rail with no AFM or extrude hone, it wouldn't make a whole lot of power. It's going to make a bunch of smoke because it's not going to burn correctly. But if I treat them proper, and extrude hone was pretty easy. That was kind of keep it simple, stupid technology. But the AFM is extremely picky, and the AFM will move things, will increase our flow from say 5 to 8%. But if the media starts to fall apart, we get a change in K factor, and guys like you will see a difference on the dyno because the holes aren't shaped the correct way on the inside or the way that you're used to per se. So then whenever we just updated media just 2 weeks ago, and it took us, I don't know, 2 days of dinking around here to understand the new pressures and how that pressure was equaling what we were used to, kind of a thing. So there's a learning curve to it, and it's a big science that we just can't go into blindly. And it's very difficult to try and express that to somebody without your experience that doesn't understand like the micro changes of performance and reliability. And when you're trying to put together, I mean, some of your motors are big money, and nobody wants to buy one, make 3 hits, and then go, hey, Chase, this thing blew up. Like, that's not very fun. So I'm trying to express to these guys like why some of their older technology stuff, or stuff that's just made in China and they're measuring it in hole size, why it doesn't, if they think they've got a 5x18 and it should outperform say a 5x14, is there any way that you can help me in different words than I've tried to use explain what it is that makes the difference, not just hole diameter but the rest of it?
Well, there's a thought process that just kind of needs to be changed. We need to get with the times. It's 2024. What was cool and what worked 10, 15 years ago doesn't mean that that's what we should be doing today. There's obviously advancements that you've made in the common rail side of things, and I'll be honest, I mean, hell, I ran your VP injectors for years, and I think I bought a set, or you sent me a set a couple of years ago, and just recently I put in your 125 horse injector, and it doesn't run as good as the 200, but they're cleaner, the motor's just happier, fuel mileage is up. Like, I know, but that 125 horse injector, you just sent them to me. I know they have your latest updates, and that's my point in the mechanical world, whether it's a 12 valve or VP, there's a lot to be gained, and you're working on that. They need to see it tangibly, on a dyno, like your 12.5 mil pump you're working with Northeast on. I think showing some guys what the injectors are doing, because you could bolt in a common set of injectors that are nothing special,
right,
and then put in that have the icing on the cake and show them what they do.
It's difficult because not everybody's going to watch that experiment, not everybody's going to be there for that experiment. And real quick, you did say you took out a set of 200s that ran better, made more power, but the motor seems happier with the 125s. And
yeah, and it's not like drastic. I bet I need to just do it on the chassis dyno. I haven't had time. I bet it wasn't but like 30 horse difference between the two.
Right.
Maybe 50. But
so the VP44 stuff is limited to engine RPM, right? And yeah, I could build a set of ginormous injectors that if the VP44 had more potential for RPM, they could make more horsepower. But since I'm limited to engine RPM based off VP44, there's really only so much injector volume that I need to give it, because you get to a certain point where it is diminishing returns. You're never going to have the piston speed required to burn that kind of fluid that fast. And it's not a common rail, so it's never going to make 30,000 pounds of line pressure anyway, right?
Yeah.
That kind of stuff is very difficult to try and express to somebody that, like making a 600 horse VP truck's not very difficult these days, but making a 1200 horsepower truck is very difficult to make especially with no nitrous, right? Like if you shock the motor hard enough early enough, I could see somebody making maybe 11 or 12 on a VP, but it wouldn't track times versus vehicle weight wouldn't come close mathematically to that 1,200 number.
With compounds and whatnot, yeah, you could make a big number, but it'd be a short, peaky number. It wouldn't be a big, long, useful power curve.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree with that. Must be that West Coast numbers, though, that 1,100 horse. That's big.
Oh, son, we learning from Canada. Canada's horsepower correction factor is way steeper than ours.
The strongest VP I've ever been in, I dynoed Johnny Gilbert's VP. God, this is years ago. I don't remember the exact number. I think it was right at 1,000 or something like that. But it had a custom pump and triples. I think it was pretty neat. But yeah, it was one of those like, hey, it hit the peak and then that was it. So like it didn't have a power curve to speak of.
Right. It was like a CR80, wildly ported.
Yeah, it did good though. I mean, it was the quickest VP I know of for a long time. Maybe there's faster now, but it was pretty neat.
Yeah, no, I think that truck's probably still at least top 3 of the quickest, if not still the quickest.
Yeah, your mechanical thing, that's going to be a hard thing to break. Everybody's just got the bigger's better mentality, and these tech segments are how you get that across. But we're going to have to show these guys, show them the light on what they need.
Yeah, and another thing, that pump that Northeast is doing, like we put timing notches in that pump, so as rack travel moves forward, we gain about 8, maybe 9, maybe 10 degrees of engine timing. And
which we go back to the opportune time.
Yep.
Getting the fuel in as it's
common rail.
Getting the fuel.
You don't set common rail timing and leave it there, right?
Yeah.
So
it's all alert based, and depending on what you need and when you need it, power wise and fuel delivery.
Automatic trucks, they gain drivability immensely in a P pump by having timing variable, because they can set the timing at 16, 17, 18 degrees initial, and then jump up to 26, 28, maybe even close to 30 degrees total at full wide open rack. And that helps them get up the converter quicker, helps them drive away from a stop sign quicker with less smoke. The truck doesn't rattle and knock, and they're a lot quieter to drive around just on the city streets kind of a thing. You put it at 28 degrees initial or static and try and drive it, and it's lethargic for the first 600-800 RPM, and then once it finally starts to wake up, it wants to party. And that's where timing in the plungers is going to make that a lot different and a lot better. And then, like hanging out at Hart's for a night, I got to talk to him about his stuff, and he's the same way. Like he's making his own plungers and barrels, and he's making them with timing, and he's trying to use all of the rack travel so he can squeak all of the advanced timing out of that stuff, which, excuse me, which I thought was really cool, because, he's making 5,000 horsepower tractors, and
oh yeah, totally different planet.
Yeah, different planet.
Pretty
awesome. His injector sizes are, well, he's got a 150 horsepower electric motor that he uses just to spin his injection pump. So, parasitic drag of all of it, but I think he told me that thing blows like 3,500 cc's per 1,000. That is a lot of fluid.
And they got to use a fair amount of that fuel to keep it cool, and keep the thing alive too. So.
Yep. That's a good question too. What do you mean by that? What are you talking about by using the fuel to keep it cool?
Well, in that application, I don't know what the actual length of injection is, how long it is, what the rate shape looks like. But some of that fuel they got to use to help cool the combustion event. So a lot of the drag race stuff, I talk about a pyramid. If you could think about a pyramid, and if you look at air fuel ratio, if you're at the top of the pyramid, that's typically the leanest, hottest EGT. Person that comes to mind best is Ryan Milligan, loves to be at the top of the pyramid.
Yeah.
Not by choice, but the way they've got his class set up, he's kind of limited on nitrous, and he's had to add fuel, and he's still toward the top of the pyramid. He hasn't been able to cool that car off yet with fuel quantity, just because he's not able to use them. It's a delicate balance in the drag world. Now in the pulling world, I talk about that pyramid. If you're on the left side of the pyramid, that's the fatter side. So let's say, you're in the 14s or 15s on AFR. If you can get down into the 12s, even the 11s, that's going to be what I consider that safe zone where you got the thing cooled off. It's going to be smoky, inherently, but we're using some fuel to cool the engine off. Like if I ran a 3-inch engine in the 14s, it would be 1900 degrees, and I don't want it to run there. Like
right.
I don't know how long it would live, not sure, but I know that we can put 100 to 150 laps, which is typically 2 seasons on a 3-inch truck, if we keep AFR between really 10 and a half and 12. If we can keep it in there, the engine's happy. But now on the completely other side of this pyramid, which is really neat, there's guys that are running a lot of nitrous that are in the mid-20s all the way up into the 40s. And with that volume of nitrous, they're able to make the burn so lean that it's kind of like a stock truck, to where the EGTs are cool enough. They've cooled the EGT, cooled it off. But it takes tons of nitrous.
Right.
Like, I'm talking like 2 bottles and a 4-second pass.
Wow. Wow. And that's at 3,000 horsepower, really, right?
Yeah, 3 plus.
Yeah. So
that's like 10, 12 pounds of nitrous.
In a pass. That's nuts. Well, I know you got to get back to the dyno and make some more hits. Did you make that second hit after you changed out that pressure limit valve?
We did, and I forgot the injectors you built me are pretty big. So, I was out of pump. That's why.
Yeah.
I pulled 200 microseconds off the curve, and gonna make another run here in a second. So
perfect.
It was really close to holding rail. It was just right on the edge of what it hold. But
gotcha.
I think the math you told me, I think I was putting in around 625 cubes when I was wanting 500. So
it's only 20% more fuel.
Yeah. We know what 500 cubes will do.
Yeah.
With a lot of air and a lot of nitrous. And 500 cubes, for example, like on Derek's, that's enough to make 3,000 horse.
Right. But there again, his AFR is how? Where is his AFR out there?
Got to be in the mid-20s.
Yeah.
Somewhere in there. But, that's a 102 millimeter turbo and
spray.
A fair amount of nitrous.
Yeah.
An intercooler, which that's a whole other topic. But I love them. They're great.
Cool, dense charges are very, very fun.
Yeah, they make power.
Yeah. Donovan was on the dyno the past 2 days. One day he was dynoing a bunch of XG stuff, and the next day he dynoed a bunch of my stuff. Basically, both the motors ran out right around 2,100 horsepower, but we were doing it like 500 US quicker, and you guys make our 12 mil pumps. So he's like, well, I thought this thing was going to, do better than that. And I'm like, all right, was everything equal? He's like, no, 2 different motors, and the second motor that our stuff was in was actually starting to make more crankcase pressure by the time they were just done on the chassis dyno. So I think he's going to have to freshen up that motor a little bit and then maybe take another stab at it. But they were making 2,100 horsepower on a single charger, Garrett GT98, and a 150 and a 40 jet. So, and that was at about, I want to say it was like, I can't touch my phone because I'm using it, but I think it was right at 1,200 US at 200 MPA.
Yep.
So, that truck has the exact same nozzle now that you're using today in Kenny's motor. So it's the latest, greatest. It's every year we keep the big sack. At first, we didn't know where to really set the needle to nozzle valve clearance. And the factory that I was having to do that probably wasn't the highest quality then either. The reason that we get those things, they continuously get better and better and better. And now we basically have like a OE quality part with a ginormous sack on it. And, well, like you said, they're quite a bit bigger, and they're holding their rail pressure better, and they're not returning near as much. So every season we just continuously get better.
That's all you got to do. Just keep getting better.
That's it. Eat more steak. Drink more whiskey, get better.
Speaking of steak, we need to go back to that steakhouse down the road from you.
Shameless plug for Wolf Lodge.
Oh, yeah. That was good filet.
Yeah. Well, man, I do appreciate your time. I'll let you get back to work, and thanks, Chase, man. It's always fun chatting with you.
All right, thanks, Lenny. Have a good one.
Later, buddy.
Take care.